Farmers organize. I want you to make note here that while I'm still looking at chapter 18, which is the New South, some of this particular video is also covered in chapter 19. I don't cover chapter 19 generally in this class. I encourage every one of you to read about it, as I'll still ask questions on it, but I don't cover every single aspect in chapter 19 that's looking at Gilded Age politics in particular. However, when it talks about organizing the Farmers Alliance and the Grange, a lot of that is actually in chapter 19, so just giving you that heads up. So we are going to see, with all of these problems going on in the South, it's really not a surprise that a lot of Southern farmers would start organizing. And by organizing, I mean basically forming labor unions, but they're not called labor unions because this isn't industry. Farmers had done things like engaging in bartering when they could. They might have some kind of supplemental income like eggs or vegetables on the side. They had done things like lobbied for debt stay laws. So this would be laws that would give them more time to pay back debt before being foreclosed on, things like that. But the big thing is they're going to end up forming a lot of farmer organizations. The thing is, farmers understood that they really needed to make the market fairer for them to work out. They needed things like lower interest rates and easier credit. They also needed things like to regulate freight rates, railroad freight rates. This would do things like they could then keep the prices of necessities in check. The problem is a lot of this would require legislation, and a lot of this type of legislation really wasn't supported by either the federal government or Southern governments at this time. So farmers across the country would join in their colleagues and form different organizations, such as you get the National Grange of the Patrons of Husbandry, also just known as the Grange. Now the thing is, the Grange, the individuals who joined this particular organization tended to be large farm owners that were not interested in the problems of small farm owners. Small farm owners tended to join in the most powerful of all of the agricultural reform organizations, known as the Alliance. Technically it was the Southern Farmers Alliance, but it really is going to spread. It's not just in the South. It spreads west, it spreads north. A lot of the people who are in this, like I said before, are small farmers who own their land. The thing is, this was so much more than like a union of sorts. This was in many ways a cultural group as well, almost like a religious denomination. Leaders would preach oftentimes from churches to huge audiences that almost acted like revivals. They would have qualification for joining the alliance would include like things like the belief in the divinity of Jesus and the literal truth of the Bible. This group, though, does get involved politically. They would lobby state legislatures to fund like rural public schools. There's also that cultural aspect that you get a sense of community with this group, that they might have picnics, baseball games, concerts. And so for many, this really becomes almost like a surrogate government and a surrogate church, where many people felt like both of those institutions were not actually meeting their needs at this time. There was very much a strict morality to the alliance. They would prohibit things like drinking, gambling, sexual misconduct. A lot of farmers in the South and the West and the North, to an extent, really were going to criticize different religious groups because they felt like they were straying from the traditional emphasis on like individual salvation, and they felt like they were just trying to defend the status quo that benefits large planters but hurts the small farmers. We even get women involved in the Farmers Alliance. However, the alliance did not allow Black members. Black farmers instead would go on to form their own Colored Farmer Alliance in 1886. However, most of the people that were in the Colored Farmer Alliance were not landowners because black people didn't necessarily have the capital to buy land. And so it's going to be made up more of like tenant farmers and sharecroppers. And so they're going to battle issues that are more relevant to their constituency. Like they wanted things like higher wages for cotton pickers. In fact, the Colored Farmers Alliance actually did attempt a region-wide strike over like farm wages. However, they really were unable to enforce it with a worsening Southern economy. Now, the White Farmers Alliance, they are also going to attempt getting involved in protests, and they're going to be more successful, especially when it comes to price fixing on jute, which was used to basically store cotton when taking it to like the market, basically. And we do see the prices of jute drop because of this protest. But really, the big thing that the White Farmers Alliance really would push for is the idea of storing cotton. This was a much more ambitious project. The problem was there's low cotton prices and a lack of capital in the South, and these two things combined basically mean that farmers are going to be kept poor. So we get leaders of the Farmers Alliance proposing the sub-treasury plan. The sub-treasury plan was the idea that Alliance members would store their crops in a sub-treasury, basically a warehouse, and this would keep the cotton off the market until the price of cotton rose. So you might be going, hey, that's like growing less cotton, but without growing less cotton. The problem is, what do you do in the meantime until you can grow your cotton? The idea behind the sub-treasury plan is that the government would actually loan farmers up to 80% of the stored crops at a very low interest rate of about 2% per year. This would really free up farmers so that they could choose to keep cotton off the market, so that they could survive in the meantime, and they could raise the price of cotton in this way. You're going to see leaders of the Farmers Alliance are going to really try to endorse political candidates who support the sub-treasury plan. Many Democrats in the South did endorse it, but a lot of times they were elected and then just failed to deliver once they were in office. Really, the whole idea of storing cotton and the sub-treasury plan, it was a failure in the end. And especially with the drop in cotton prices after about 1890, this really is going to undermine the alliance overall, and you get membership declining during that point. A lot of members of the alliance, though, would end up merging their organization with a new national political party starting in about 1892, known as the Populist Party. And the Populist Party would try to challenge Democrats in the South and Republicans in the West and stir up national politics. This is that part of Chapter 19 that I don't necessarily go over, and I would recommend you reading on your own.